Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the MindsetGo radio show, ICommunicate, and happy to be back with you here on Thursday afternoon. And, it's funny, I'm going to be doing a program this afternoon and throughout the school year at Assabet High School called Competing in Sports and Life. And the program is designed to help coaches with emotional intelligence and deal with all the different relationships they have in dealing with their players and the parents and their assistant coaches and referees and fans and opposing teams and all the different relationships they have. And as I was preparing for the program last night, I was thinking to myself, what a great topic for the radio show today to talk about winning and the lure of winning. And I was thinking to myself, why do we want to win so bad? And we see it a lot in sports. I mean, we see it in business, sports, school. I mean, we see, that lure of winning as a very powerful concept. But I started to think, why do we want to win so bad? And for who do we want to win so bad? Because it's not just winning. It's almost like we're proving something in many cases to someone when we do get that win. And it got me thinking, who are we proving ourselves to at the same time? So I was thinking back to 1987. And I was very fortunate growing up. My father had season tickets to the Celtics. They've been in our family for almost 45 years now. And I was thinking, there was a situation where 1987 in the NBA Finals when the Celtics were playing the Lakers. And I believe it was Game 4 where Magic Johnson hit a hook shot at the buzzer to beat the Celtics and really tilt the series in the Lakers' favor. And I remember to this day, this is now, we're on 32 years ago, and I remember this day as if it was yesterday. I remember I was at the game, and I literally needed to be pried from my seat because I was so unhappy and disappointed. I remember my father and I were among the last people to leave the garden because I was just inconsolable. And I remember how much that game meant to me. And I've thought in the last several years since, why was that so important to me? And I think about the feeling we get when we win, or when the team we root for wins, or when the team or the department we're on in the workplace wins. Why is that so meaningful? And I think there's a lot of reasons. But, one of the reasons I think it is the fact that we all work really hard, theoretically, and the amount of effort we put in to success, that's the reward, is the win. And I find so many people and we see this a lot in kids for sure, but when so many people work so hard to be successful of something and they don't have that outcome of success tacked on to the hard work, it feels like, well, why did I do that? Why did I put all that effort in if I was going to lose anyway, or if I wasn't going to hit my goals, or if I wasn't going to be successful or hit whatever standards or objectives I laid out for myself? And it's a pretty empty feeling. It's an empty feeling as a coach. It's an empty feeling as a player. It's an empty feeling as a boss. It's an empty feeling as an organization. But what really got me thinking is, yes, it's an empty feeling, but why does everything have to be so black and white? I would imagine if your son or daughter worked really hard to compete in a sport or in theater or in music or whatever, or in robotics or whatever extracurricular activity or passion they had, and you saw the work ethic and you saw the commitment, and they came home and said to you, yeah, it was all a waste of time. I didn't win, or I didn't, they're disappointed. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a lot of parents that would confirm that emotion and feeling and say, you're right, it was a waste of time. And so I guess I try to figure out why is there no gray area? Why is there only black and white? And so much of that lure of winning is it builds a self-esteem and confidence that not only did the work or effort I put in pay off, but now I feel like I was actually a contributing factor to something that was successful. and I feel like I fit in, I'm part of something successful, which so many people want to fit in and find their place and find their identity. And being part of a winning team or being part of a winning organization so supports that from a confidence perspective, from a self-esteem perspective, from a mindset. And so I think about that, and I think about that aspect of winning. And then I think how all those characteristics play out in who are you doing it for? You know, Tom Brady has talked a lot about, as a sixth-round draft pick, and being passed over by so many teams and quote-unquote being disrespected. You know, he's worn that as a chip on his shoulder. So every time Tom Brady, that's why he hasn't gotten tired. He still feels like he has to prove himself. But that expression, prove himself, is very interesting to me because that means in some ways he's doing it for other people because he doesn't feel like he'll be accepted. He doesn't feel like he'll be respected for his accomplishments. So a lot of times when someone feels like they have to win, they're doing it to prove themselves to someone else or prove they're good enough. But they don't even truly appreciate the accomplishment themselves in many cases because they're doing it for someone else. Many of us are people pleasers. Many of us hate disappointment. And so the opportunity to be successful so someone else will recognize you, someone else will appreciate you, someone else will confirm and validate your worth and contribution, those are pretty powerful emotions. And people are so desperate, and rightfully so. People are so desperate for the opportunity to be a part of success, to confirm those emotions, that's why winning becomes so critical. And there's such a focus on the outcome of winning. And you know, the funny thing about winning is it's addictive. You know, once you've had a taste of it, you want more and more. I mean, look, I understand the rest of the country probably resents all the success Boston sports teams have had, and I'm sure most of us take it for granted. And we don't appreciate how fortunate we've been to have a city that's had so much success in sports. But that's just it. Once you taste that success, you want more and more. Your expectations go higher and higher. Your standards of what is good and what isn't goes higher and higher. And that's not always good. You know, one of the best lessons I've learned as a trainer and a coach working with companies throughout the country is I used to wear it as a badge of honor where I would tell people, you know, when I do sales and business development, that if I had 10 clients and I was able to only close 9 of them, I would tell everybody I wouldn't even enjoy the 9. I would be too upset on why I didn't get the 10th and how could I be better. And I used to be so proud when I told people that. But I'm not proud anymore. That's not how I want to live my life. I want to enjoy the success. And I want to have a core value of learning to grow and be better when I have a perceived failure. But I think the way our internal template of what our standards and expectations are for ourselves very much play into how we manage and develop other people on the court, on the field, at a company. Because whatever your standards and expectations are, those are going to rub off in terms of how you manage other people and how you develop other people and how they can be appreciated and recognized as well. So I just feel that, you know, as you're sitting here listening to the show today and you're evaluating why winning, if winning is important to you, and if so, why, is it important because it allows you recognition that you crave, which does not make you high maintenance? Is it important because it helps you build up your confidence and self-esteem and validates the hard work that you're doing? What is it? Why do you enjoy winning? And make sure as you reflect and do some introspection on this, understand what is it that you're actually getting out of, what is the intrinsic I know what the extrinsic rewards are, but what are the intrinsic rewards to winning? So when we come back, we will talk more about winners and losers. This is Mark Altman with the Mindset Go radio show. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to the Mindset Go radio show, and we are talking about the addiction and lure of winning and why it is so meaningful to us. And, you know, it's funny. I was just sharing a story right before the break of the NBA Finals in 1987, and I remember, even as a kid, I remember whether I was playing Monopoly or I love board games and I love playing cards. And I remember so much being so attached to winning. And I've done some reflection on that. And I thought to myself, if I beat someone else in a game, does it mean I'm better than them? Really, does it mean I'm better than them? Not necessarily. Right? Every squirrel finds a nut. And actually, when you think about a pattern and a precedent in longevity related to winning, it really doesn't, unless you do it over a consistent period of time, it doesn't technically mean you're better than them. But for that moment, you feel better than them because you won the game. So you must have been better. Now you have to ask yourself, was your success due to luck? Was your success due to skill? Was it due to your ability because you're smarter, your strategic approach was better? Maybe. But there's a lot of factors that go into winning. And then when we're talking about an individual competition, there truly are a lot of factors that go into winning. So then I think to myself, okay, what does it mean? And so as I've gotten older and more experience in my career and work with more companies, I start to think it's not so much the winning, it's the sustainability of winning. And so if you work at a company, if you're a coach and you've had success, how do you sustain it? And sure, you need the talent. I mean, talent is an important factor, but it's not the only factor. And frankly, it's a little bit of an overrated factor. And one of the reasons that I focus when I work with individuals and organizations, I focus on three kinds of intelligence. I focus on emotional intelligence, I focus on conversational intelligence, and I focus on multi-generational intelligence. And the idea behind that is talent can only take you so far. IQ and how smart you are can only take you so far. So how do you create a sustainable culture of winning and success? But do it the right way, not for short-term gain, not for temporary satisfaction, not for a brief boost of ego or adrenaline, really a sustainable method of winning. And the way you do it is through habits. You do it through creating processes that are scalable and repeatable. You do it by emphasizing the behaviors and attitudes that you're trying to create. Now, as I was driving in today, I noticed on Facebook a local coach, he put up a meme on Facebook and he said something like, you know, what's more important, winning or developing the habits and attitudes that your kids can take forward for the rest of your life? That's a really interesting question. And one of the challenges I see that coaches deal with is they're getting very, very mixed messages. The school, theoretically, is telling the coaches, you want to keep your job. And not that they're saying it in so many words, but the perception and the understood message is, you're going to keep your job if you win. Okay? And the parents, who knows the message the parents are giving, because so many parents live vicariously through their success and development of their kids in all aspects of life, school, sports, you name it. But there's a mixed message where the school very often is reinforcing winning. If it's a private school, you're absolutely reinforcing winning because you want the attendance. I mean, you want the membership at the school. And the parents, if they have expectations of their kids continuing to grow and get scholarships and maybe play college and continue and have a chance to make the varsity and all these things, parents might really want that winning. But then there's a lot of other parents that really could care less about winning, and it's all about seeing their kids develop as athletes and individuals. Right? And then there's a group of parents that only care about playing time. I want to see my kid out there. And there's this attitude, well, my kid goes to practice, and there's a sense of entitlement that my kid should be playing more. So when you think about a mixed message a coach on a sports team gets, you're being pulled in so many different directions. You have so many diverse interests from the parents. Who knows the messages you're getting from the school, and not to mention the culture, the internal pressure you put on yourself as a coach, because if you're in that culture, you already are taught to win and be successful. And it's a real struggle, for coaches to be emotionally intelligent and to balance all those expectations. It's a real struggle. But part of making that happen is knowing what works, having an internal template that will create a winning culture and a success without second guessing yourself and without questioning if what you're doing is right. And that's a very hard thing to do, because if you've had success and you've had a formula that works and all of a sudden someone starts to question it, most of us will start to question ourselves. What happens if you're a coach and you've been at a school where your team's made the playoffs 3 straight years, and all of a sudden your 4th year, your team's terrible? We start to wonder, what's going on here? Is it an off year? Have you lost it? Are you adapting when you need to adapt? All these questions start to be muttered, and the perception is that you've lost your way and you don't know how to win anymore. It's no different from a leadership team making innovative growth decisions for their company every day, who've had 3 big years in a row, and all of a sudden they have either a bad year or a few off quarters. Same thing for a sales team. Sales guy wins Salesman of the Year, shatters all kinds of quotas and expectations, and all of a sudden the next 3 to 6 months, he or she can't find their way. These people were winners. These leaders were winners. These coaches were winners. These salespeople were winners. But now they're not winners anymore. Doesn't make sense. Is that the way we're choosing to look at life? You're a winner or you're not. And if you used to win and you're not winning, what's going on? Why aren't you winning anymore? And by the way, self-assessing and understanding why you're not having success you used to have, I'm all for that. I teach that. Being able to accurately self-assess yourself is a huge leadership quality. The concern I have is when you accurately self-assess yourself, what are the rules you're making to determine whether what you're doing is the right formula or not? And if the rules are not consistent and you're very prone to the outside voice, in the case of sports, of parents, athletic directors, boosters, you name it, and you don't have a template, an internal template says, these are my objectives, these are my goals to develop these athletes, then it becomes a mess. And self-assessment turns into second guessing. And there's a big difference, right? Because healthy evaluation, self-assessment with a routine and a formula to do so. Second guessing is you don't have that template and you're very susceptible to outside influences. And frankly, the outside influences are having too much of an impact in your approach. Look, the bottom line is that I don't want you to take from the show today, I love to win. There's nothing wrong with loving to win and wanting to win and craving to be successful. That's not the message. The message is, why do you want to win so bad? What is the meaning you associate with winning? And whether it's for yourself, your team, your company, whatever it is, how do you create the behaviors, the habits, and the attitudes to make it sustainable, regardless of the talent or the skill set you're working with, regardless. So when we come back, we're going to talk more about some of the challenges coaches face in the sports world and the competing in sports and life aspect, and some of the ways coaches can work around those challenges and deal with the many relationships they have to manage. This is Mark Altman for the Mindset Go radio show. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to the Mindset Go radio show, talking about the lure of winning and categorizing, being very black and white about winners and losers, and also talking about some of the challenges that coaches have to deal with in the relationships they manage, and whether that be, again, with players and parents and their assistants and opposing teams, referees, fans, and all the above. And we're going to talk in the next couple of segments on some of those challenges and what they really mean. And so when I think of some of the challenges coaches have, and when you really need the emotional intelligence, and for those of you listeners who aren't familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence, I just want to quickly take you through what the concepts are, because to me, these are the most essential concepts in being a happy and healthy emotionally, mentally, and physically as a human being. So emotional intelligence has 5 components. One is self-awareness. One is self-control. One is motivation. One is empathy. And one is social skills, specifically around perception. So think of these scenarios that coaches have to deal with. A player not working hard at practice. A player not listening during the games. Let's just start right there with those two. If you're a coach and you see those two things, the emotional intelligence aspect that kicks in is self-control. How do you react? So when you have someone, what's really going on here, right? Someone's not working hard or not listening. I don't care what environment you're talking about. They're disappointing you. They're not meeting your expectations. That's what's really going on. Call it whatever you want. They're disappointing you. They're not meeting your expectations. And when people disappoint us and don't meet our expectations, we feel rejected, right? Because it's like, we're not worthy necessarily of being listened to. Other people have different agendas. So the question is, if you see someone exhibiting those characteristics, how do you react? What is going to motivate someone? What is going to engage someone to behave differently? If someone's not working hard at practice, it's unlikely because they're just trying to upset you and frustrate you. If someone isn't engaged in the workplace, same thing. Why are they not working hard? Why are they not engaged? Are they not passionate about what they're doing? Do they not enjoy their teammates or coworkers? Do they feel like you're not personally invested in their success? It's probably one of those. But we tend to react to the immediate situation. So when someone isn't working hard or not listening, or their attention seems divided or elsewhere, we're reactive. You're not working hard, you're not listening. And then we use the righting reflex and we tell them what they're not doing that we want them to do. And we're hoping by calling it out and by pointing it out to them that now that we're alerting you to this, you need to stop doing it. And that rarely works, because most of the time, someone who's not working hard or not listening, they know what they're doing. They've actually made a decision to not listen or not work hard because of one of the aforementioned scenarios I spoke of a few minutes ago. So there's this desire when people feel like they've disappointed us or they've not met our expectations to be reactive, express our frustrations, vent to people, hoping that that's going to change the behavior and habit, and it rarely, if ever, does. We need to understand the root cause of a human being's behavior. Think about that. What is going to get a human being to change their behavior? And having a conversation with someone that's not working hard, or having a conversation with someone who's not listening during a game, let's take a step back and say, well, wait a minute. I noticed you're not listening. What's going on? Is everything okay? Sure. And they're not going to cooperate. I don't care whether this is a student or an adult in the workplace. Most people aren't going to want to immediately offer up why. So you have to be patient, right? So what's going on? I noticed I don't have your full attention. Oh, I don't know, just not into it, not having a good day. That's when we get impatient and we get frustrated. If we're trying to get to the root cause, we have to really explore why they're acting the way they are. Before we can decide if we can help and how we can help, we have to understand what the real problem is. And there's an expectation for coaches. I don't care whether you want to win or don't want to win. This is part of the winning formula. Being able to talk to an athlete and be able to get to the root cause of what their real concern is, right? That is going to create a winning culture. Because if you put a Band-Aid and you just keep using the writing reflex and saying you need to work harder and you need to listen more, you need to run the plays the way I say to run the plays. What if they don't? What's the consequence? They're going to lose playing time? And in the workplace, what's the consequence? Are they going to get fired? I've been talking to a lot of companies lately about the concept of when you have a leader or an employee, someone who is very valuable to the organization, but forgive the expression, they have warts. There's certain aspects about them that really are not good habits, not good behaviors, and that take away from you appreciating them as a teammate, athlete, employee, you name it. The problem is, what are your repercussions? The salesperson that doesn't update their CRM, but is hitting his quota but not keeping things updated, not adding notes, the salesperson knows they're not going to get fired. The leader who has the highest client satisfaction rate in the company, who doesn't deal with people well and irritates people because of that person's lack of emotional intelligence, do you think the leader's really worried he or she's going to get fired? No. And then the athlete who feels entitled because he or she knows he's one of the best players on the team, or he or she's on the best players on the team, and the parents tell them how great they are all the time, what do you think your threats are going to mean? They know you need them. And I know some coaches are listening to this and will say, well, that's not true. That's not my core values. And I agree. Some coaches don't coach that way. But at the end of the day, part of emotional intelligence is, how do you motivate people? We grow up in a culture, in a society, where we use motivation through consequences. In school, you don't behave, you get a detention. At home, you don't do your chores, you don't act responsibly, you get punished. In the workplace, if you don't do your job, theoretically, you get fired. But that's the problem. If it's not to the level of getting fired, what do you have to motivate? And that's where so many leaders fall short. If they don't have the consequence to cling on to, they don't know how to create habit change. They don't know how to change behaviors, and they don't know how to properly motivate people intrinsically. And in the workplace, it's not just the consequences of being fired. It's also the consequence of, it's not just the consequence of being fired. It's the extrinsic rewards. So what else do we have in the workplace? If you do what you're supposed to do, we'll give you bonuses, we'll give you more time off, we'll give you trips, we'll give you incentives. That's what we have to go with. Extrinsic motivators and consequences. And I got to tell you, that doesn't create, in many cases, long-term behavior and habit change. So part of being a leader and being a coach is understand what buttons you need to press, how you can adapt your communication style, how you can adapt your leadership style to know how to reach every person on your team. And I got to tell you, too many people in leadership positions see that as a burden. I see it as a challenge. I genuinely see it as a challenge. That is something that I've always loved about human psychology. How can you connect with people? How can you relate to people in a way they understand and they appreciate? Every time I can make that connection with another human being, that is an intrinsic reward for me, because that tells me I took the time to really understand how to empathize with them, how to motivate them, how to be self-aware of their needs and wants. It doesn't feel like I'm coddling someone. It doesn't feel like I need to walk on eggshells. It doesn't feel like it's extra work. It feels like that's how you deal with human beings. When we come back for our final segment, we will continue to talk about effective communication among coaches and leaders and players and employees. This is Mark Altman for the Mindset Go radio show. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to our final segment of the Mindset Go radio show. Glad you're with us today. And, so much of what I try to do from a communication perspective, regardless of the age of the person I'm teaching, the skills, knowledge, and experience of the person I'm teaching, is to really understand that there are some core communication principles that are so critical. And in those core communication principles, it doesn't matter what age. There's just certain things that you have to be mindful and self-aware of when you're communicating with others. Again, especially if you're trying to elicit behavior or habit change. So we were talking right before the break of some of the challenges you can have in getting to the root cause of problems and understanding why people aren't engaged and why people are acting the way they are. And one of the issues that coaches often run into is when their players make mistakes during the game. Now, when a player makes a mistake during a game, part of what happens, our inner voice, what we're asking is, why did they make the mistake? Was it a physical mistake? Was it a mental mistake? Or was it just a lack of effort? Right? And so right off the bat, we're going to make a quick judgment, and often that judgment is going to be based on our experience with that player or that employee. And what's our track record with them? Have they exhibited that behavior in the past? Have we seen it in practice? Have we seen that lack of engagement? And if we've seen a pattern or track record, we're going to probably default to the one that's going to make us the most mad. And what's interesting to me about this is when someone makes a mistake, all right, most of the time, if you're competing, you know the mistake and you're already beating yourself up and already feeling a consequence. If you will work on a team in the workplace and you've just put a big project together and something you did was incorrect or hampered the success of the project, and you know it, you don't need anybody to tell you. You already are beating yourself up, and you know that. And too often leaders want to point out the mistake and want to explain to the person who made the mistake how it hurt them. That doesn't feel like the best way to approach it. That is another example, and I've alluded to it a few times in the show, this thing called the writing reflex, writing spelled R-I-G-H-T-I-N-G, and the writing reflex is to tell someone the answers, tell someone how they can be better. And what's really bad about the writing reflex is it reinforces a hierarchy where we're trying to eliminate. The best leaders and the best coaches put themselves on the same level of that person so it doesn't feel like there's a pull of authority. So when someone makes that mistake and you're like, Mary, that mistake really hurt us, and here's why, and here's how you can do it better. That's really not the right way to lead. If you want someone to understand about the mistake, ask them, what did you see there? Why did you approach it that way? Get them to talk. You don't be the one talking. Get inside their head. Understand their thought process. Understand why they make the decisions they do, right? That's what leaders do, because then you truly get to know who you're managing and who you're working with. So when that person turns the ball over, the basketball player turns the ball over in a critical situation, what was going on? Maybe they were feeling anxious and stressed by the pressure of the situation. How often do we see in sports, there's certain athletes the Tom Brady's, the Kobe Bryant's, the Michael Jordans, that just absolutely live for the pressure. And quote unquote, we love using this expression, rise to the occasion. Think about that expression, rise to the occasion. But and the ones that don't, well, they're losers, right? They can't perform in the clutch, right? But what if they turn the ball over because they were putting so much pressure on themselves and their inner voice was distracting them from the goal and the vision of what they were trying to accomplish? Could be, right? It really could be. So if the inner voice is putting too much pressure and you compound that pressure by reminding them of it, that doesn't help. What helps is understanding what their thought process was, and maybe you can give them some mindfulness techniques, or maybe you can give them strategies so they don't put so much pressure on themselves, so they can relax. And if you're a hockey player, you don't clutch the stick so tight. If you're a baseball player, it doesn't affect your ability to pitch or hit. If you're a basketball player, you're less likely to make a mistake in a big situation. So when someone makes a mistake, understand from their perspective, not your assumptions, not your perceptions. Understand from their perspective why they made the mistake. What were they thinking? How do they make decisions? How do they calm their nerves? How do they put themselves in a position to succeed? That's what we should be finding out. And guess what? The fact of the matter is, if it was a physical mistake, you don't even need that long conversation. It might have just been a physical mistake. But my concern is, it's the assumption and perception of what we are already thinking of why the mistake happened, and the agenda in our mind that we are creating. So I think it's very important when you think about making mistakes and how to nurture and develop people to really take those things into consideration, empower them to think, be curious about why it happened, ask questions, avoid using the writing reflex, don't make statements. Get to know the person you're leading and managing. Now, we're going to cover one other quick session because we're almost out of time today. We're going to talk about one other aspect today about emotional intelligence, and that's dealing with fans. And boy, we see this often with referees. I mean, referees are constantly being tested because when you are a fan and you show up to a game, if the referee makes a bad call or the umpire makes a bad call, a lot of us take it personally. You're interfering with the potential outcome and success my team, my son, my daughter can have. And so we take a personal affront. Oh, the referee doesn't know what they're doing. They're not qualified. They're not credible. And you know what? I'm not going to get into too much detail about this today. We'll talk at next week's show. We'll continue to talk about this. But what I am going to say is there's one fundamental thing I try to remember about officials and around emotional intelligence. And by the way, the people who know me very well know that over the course of my coaching career, and I've gotten way better, but over the course, I've been very tough on officials and umpires. So for those of you who know me, listen to the show, you're probably laughing like of all the people to talk about this. But the fact of the matter is, you know, I'd like to think I've matured and grown, and I recognize it from a self-awareness, and I recognize it from the feedback I've received. But what I will say is, why is it that we can understand why our players can make mistakes? And why is it that we could certainly understand coaches make mistakes, but we really, really struggle to understand that officials can make mistakes? And so the expectation and standard is so high for officials because we take it personally, because we're so invested in the outcome for our teams, the outcome for our children, that the standards are so much higher for officials because they are directly interfering with the outcome we're seeking. And it's really, when you take a step back, it's not rational. And that's not to say there aren't incompetent officials and umpires. That's not to say there aren't officials and umpires that show a real lack of hustle and effort to get in position to see the play. I mean, whenever I watch a professional baseball game and I see these umpires who barely have to move the whole game and they make a bad call because they weren't in the right position to make the call, that's a different story to me, because that's about work ethic and competence. But if you're talking general mistakes, it's not rational. We need to have the latitude, and we need to remember that, and one of the biggest motivators for me to change my own behavior was I realized I was modeling behavior for parents, for fans, for my assistant coaches, and for my players. Modeling behavior, think about that. That is the most important job. You know, the running joke, do as I say, not as I do. Well, no, it's do as I say and do as I do. And such a critical role in being an effective leader is knowing how to model behavior. So I hope you enjoyed the show today. We covered a lot of ground on effective leadership and communication around motivation, habit change, the allure and addiction of winning, and we will continue this topic and explore it more next week. This has been Mark Altman for the Mindset Go radio show. If you'd like to contact us and learn more about our different professional development programs we do for organizations, or the programs we do for schools around competing in sports and life and 8th grade orientations, you can reach out to us at the website's mindsetgo.com. You can reach me at I'm Mark Altman at maltman@mindsetgo.com. And otherwise, I wish you a wonderful week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Thursday.